The village was a blotch of dilapidated houses on the horizon, barely more than a ghostly silhouette under the pale light of the waning moon. It was the last stop on our week-long road trip, an idea that now seemed more ill-advised than adventurous. The five of us, Mark, Sarah, Jake, Emily, and I, were itching for one last thrill before heading back to our mundane lives. We found it in the stories about the cursed village, whispered in dark corners of the internet, and we were foolish enough to seek it out. We rolled into the village in the late afternoon, our car's tires crunching on the gravel road that led us into the heart of desolation. The air was thick with an unsettling quiet, punctuated only by the creak of rotting wood and the distant cry of a lone crow. The village was a relic of the past, abandoned for reasons that were as vague as they were sinister. Some said the villagers had vanished overnight. Others spoke of a plague that had wiped them out. What intrigued us most was the rumor of a curse that befell anyone who dared to disturb the village's eerie peace. We set up camp in the central square, a decision that seemed logical in the waning daylight, but increasingly foolish as shadows lengthened and merged into an impenetrable blanket of darkness. Our tents flapped in the growing wind, a whispering sound that seemed to carry voices. But it wasn't the wind that set our nerves on edge. It was the feeling of being watched, an oppressive presence that seemed to seep from the very ground. As night fell, we huddled around a fire, its flickering light casting grotesque shadows on the decaying buildings. Mark, always the skeptic, laughed off our unease. "It's just an old ghost town," he said, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. Sarah and Emily, always the thrill-seekers, were eager to explore. Jake, the most superstitious among us, kept glancing over his shoulder, his face pale and drawn. First sign of trouble came with the wind. It picked up suddenly, a howling gale that snuffed out our fire and plunged us into darkness. Emily screamed, a short, sharp sound that was cut off abruptly. We fumbled with our flashlights, their beams slicing through the blackness to reveal Emily standing rigid, her eyes wide with terror. She pointed a trembling finger toward the outskirts of the village, where a figure stood just beyond the reach of the light. It was a man, or what had once been a man. His clothes were tattered, his skin a sickly gray, but it was his eyes that held us captive. They were hollow, empty sockets that seemed to draw in the light. He raised a skeletal hand and beckoned. Then he was gone, swallowed by the night. "We need to leave," Jake whispered, his voice shaking. But our car wouldn't start. The engine turned over with a sickly grind but refused to catch. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped. We decided to hole up in one of the more intact houses, barricading the door and windows with whatever we could find. The interior was a time capsule, with dusty furniture and faded photographs that hinted at the lives once lived there. We huddled together in the living room, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. It was Sarah who found the journal. She pulled it from a drawer, its leather cover cracked and brittle. The entries were dated over a century ago, written in a flowing script that became increasingly erratic. "July 12th, 1889, she read aloud. "The sickness has taken another 3. The village is in mourning, but there is no time for grief. We must contain it. The curse will spread if we do not act." The entries became more frantic, detailing desperate measures to halt the plague. Then the final entry. "We have sealed the village. The curse must die with us." A chill ran through us. The curse. It was real, and we had walked right into its grasp. The night dragged on, every minute an eternity. We took turns keeping watch, though sleep was impossible. The wind continued to howl, carrying with it whispers of the damned. Around midnight, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They weren't just outside anymore. They were in the room with us. Mark was the first to crack. He stood abruptly, his eyes glazed. "We have to leave," he muttered. He muttered, heading for the door. We tried to stop him, but he was stronger than any of us expected. He flung open the door and stepped into the night. We watched in horror as he was engulfed by the darkness, his screams echoing back to us. Panic overtook us. Sarah and Emily clung to each other, sobbing. Jake and I barricaded the door again, though it felt like a futile gesture. The whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of voices pleading, accusing, threatening. And then we saw them. Figures emerging from the shadows, their hollow eyes fixed on us. They pressed against the windows, their skeletal hands scraping against the glass. The house shook with their fury, the walls vibrating with an unholy energy. "We need to find the source," Jake said suddenly. The journal said they sealed the curse. Maybe we can break it. It was a desperate plan, but we had no other options. We gathered what little courage we had left and ventured out into the night, the figures parting to let us pass. They followed us at a distance, their presence a constant weight on our backs. The journal hinted at an old chapel on the edge of the village, a place where the final rituals had been performed. It was our only lead. We made our way there, the path lit by our flickering flashlights and the ghostly glow of the moon. The chapel was a ruin, its roof caved in and its pews rotting. But the altar remained, a stark stone slab covered in dark stains. Behind it, a large stone door was set into the ground, sealed with heavy chains and a rusted lock. "This is it," Jake said, his voice barely audible. "This is where they sealed the curse." We worked frantically to break the lock, using a rusted crowbar we found among the debris. The chains fell away with a heavy clatter, and we heaved the door open. A foul stench wafted up from the darkness below. We descended into the crypt, our flashlights casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. At the bottom, we found a small chamber, its floor covered in ancient runes. In the center lay a stone coffin, its lid slightly ajar. "We have to destroy it," Jake said. "It's the only way." We pushed the lid off, revealing a mummified corpse clutching a small black book. The book pulsed with a malevolent energy, its pages covered in the same runes as the floor. Jake grabbed the book and threw it into the fire pit at the corner of the chamber. The flames roared to life, consuming the book in an instant. The ground shook violently, and a scream of pure agony echoed through the crypt. We ran. The figures outside writhed in pain, their forms dissolving into the night as the curse was lifted. We reached the surface, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The village was silent once more, its oppressive presence lifted. We made our way back to the car, which now started without issue. We drove away, the village receding in the rearview mirror, a fading memory of terror. We didn't speak much after that. The experience had scarred us, leaving us haunted by the whispers of the damned. We vowed never to return, never to speak of what happened. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear them. The voices, the whispers, calling me back to the cursed village, and I wonder if we truly escaped, or if the curse has simply found a new home within us.